Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. It started as a joke. That's what she said, smiling over her iced caramel latte at Starbucks, her phone lighting up with notifications she didn't even bother to hide anymore. Let's fake a breakup for fun, she laughed. I remember how the word fun echoed in my head like a dare. I just nodded. Sure. Her name's Emily. We'd been together 5 years, married for 2. Lately, she'd turned every quiet evening into a performance for her friends online. She loved playing with the idea of freedom, posting cryptic captions, late-night stories, pretending to be single. I played along, like a fool who didn't want to break the illusion. The plan was simple. We'd fake a breakup on social media, act distant for a few days, and then come back stronger, as she put it. She thought it would make us look real, authentic, something about boosting engagement. She said it like we were running a brand, not a marriage. That night, I packed a small bag, my passport, my laptop. I didn't tell her where I was going, because I didn't know myself. The silence in our apartment felt heavy, like something had already ended long before her little game. She posted the breakup the next morning. A photo of her wine glass on the counter, captioned, "Sometimes you have to lose someone to find yourself again." The comments poured in. Her friends sent hearts, encouragement, validation. I stayed quiet. No post, no reaction. Just gone. By the evening, I was in an airport terminal, sipping black coffee, staring at my boarding pass, Mail Maldives. A random choice, but it felt right. I wanted distance. Space. The kind that doesn't ask for explanations. When the plane lifted off, I turned my phone to airplane mode and watched the lights of the city fade beneath me. That was the first moment in months I felt peace. Day 1, I didn't check my phone. I walked barefoot along white sand, the air warm, the ocean stretching endlessly in front of me. Somewhere between the palm trees and the soft crash of waves, I realized how easy it was to disappear when no one expects you to. Day 2, I finally turned my phone back on. 50 missed calls, 15 unread texts, all from her. The same woman who laughed 2 days ago about pretending to lose me, now sounding like someone who actually had. I didn't reply. I left the phone face down on the beach chair beside me, ordered another drink, and stared at the horizon. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was just gone. When the sun went down, I opened my messages again. The last one from her said, "This isn't funny anymore. Please come home." I smiled, not out of cruelty, but realization. She'd built her life around attention. Now she was finally feeling what silence sounded like. And I wasn't coming back, at least not as the same man who left. By the time I woke up on the second morning, the ocean was already a soft mirror of light. My phone buzzed again, another 20 missed calls. Emily's messages had shifted tone overnight. The first ones were casual, playful even. Then came confusion, then panic. By now, it was pure desperation. She wrote that she couldn't sleep, that people were asking questions, that she didn't understand what was happening. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the small cafe near the resort, ordered black coffee, and sat by the water. The barista wore a faded Nike cap and smiled without asking anything. No one here knew who I was. No one cared. That anonymity felt like oxygen. Back home, she was probably trying to keep up appearances. I could imagine her scrolling through Instagram, refreshing my profile, waiting for something, anything. She used to thrive on being the one in control, the one who knew exactly how to draw attention. But silence is a mirror, and she was finally seeing herself in it. By afternoon, my phone lit up again. This time, a message from my friend Ryan. Just a single line. "Man, what's going on with you too?" Attached was a screenshot, Emily's latest post. A picture of her at Olive Garden, sitting alone, eyes red from crying, captioned, "Be careful what you pretend. Sometimes it becomes real." The comments were pouring in, friends offering sympathy, strangers tagging each other, her story turning viral in a small-town way. I looked at it once and closed the phone. I didn't feel anger, not even satisfaction. Just a deep, quiet understanding of how fragile everything had been. That evening, I sat on the balcony, watching the sunset bleed into the horizon. For the first time in a long time, I thought about how we got here. The late nights she spent working on her phone, the sudden secrets, the casual dismissals. She'd said I was too serious, too predictable, not exciting enough. Now she was learning what real unpredictability looked like. When the night came, I turned off my phone again. No calls, no noise. Just the sound of waves and my own breathing. It wasn't about punishing her anymore. It was about stepping out of the role I'd been trapped in, the dependable one, the steady background character in her highlight reel. I wasn't that man anymore. Somewhere between the salt in the air and the quiet of that night, I realized she might finally understand the cost of her games. And maybe, for the first time, I was ready to let her. The third day, I woke up before sunrise. The beach was empty except for a couple taking photos near the water, pretending to be in love. I watched them for a moment, realizing how much of life was just performance. Maybe that's what our marriage had become. Two people rehearsing affection in public while growing strangers in private. When I finally checked my phone, there were messages not just from Emily, but from mutual friends too. Ryan again, then Melissa, her best friend. The tone was the same in both, concern mixed with curiosity. They were trying to figure out who ended it first. Emily had told everyone we'd agreed to take a break. I hadn't agreed to anything. One message stood out. It wasn't from her or our friends. It was from an unknown number with a photo attachment. I opened it and froze. It was a picture of Emily at a rooftop bar, sitting close to someone I didn't recognize. The timestamp was from 2 weeks before our fake breakup. Her hand was on his shoulder. He was smiling. She wasn't faking that smile. I didn't feel shock, just a strange calm. It explained too much. The emotional distance. The sudden experiment. She hadn't been testing our relationship. She'd been softening the ground for her escape. I ordered breakfast, black coffee, fruit, and toast, and sat alone by the pool. The world was waking up slowly, tourists talking, music playing faintly from a speaker nearby. I opened her messages again. I miss you. Please just answer. This isn't what I meant. The desperation was growing, but I couldn't tell if it was about me or about losing control of her narrative. By midday, I got a call from Ryan. I didn't answer. He texted instead. You should know she's been asking about you nonstop. She looks wrecked, man. Then another message, a minute later. Also, there's talk about her and that guy from her office. People are starting to connect things. I turned off the phone again and stared out over the water. There was no satisfaction in hearing that. Only the quiet confirmation that truth eventually reveals itself, no matter how carefully someone hides it. That night, I took a walk along the beach. The stars were out, clear and sharp. I thought about how silence can destroy someone who depends on noise to exist. She had always needed to be seen. And now, no one could unsee what was happening. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning distance. Strategic, silent distance. The kind that speaks louder than confrontation ever could. By the fourth day, something shifted. I wasn't just escaping anymore. I was observing. Watching how everything she'd built started to crumble without me lifting a finger. The man in the photo from that rooftop bar turned out to be her coworker, Nathan. He was the one she used to mention casually in conversation, always saying he was just funny. Turns out, he was funny enough to risk everything for. Ryan sent another text. He said people at her office were whispering that someone had seen her storm out of a meeting crying. I could imagine it clearly. Her perfect image cracking under pressure, the performance falling apart. And still, I didn't respond. Not to her. Not to anyone. Instead, I rented a small boat that afternoon and went out into open water. The resort staff helped me with the ropes, their movements quiet and methodical. No questions, no judgment. Just space. The kind of silence that doesn't demand an explanation. I watched the island fade behind me and realized I hadn't thought about returning once. Later that evening, I sat on the dock with a drink in hand, scrolling through the few photos I'd taken. The ocean, the sunset, the blurred faces of strangers who didn't care who I was. It felt like my life had finally gone off script. And I liked it that way. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, a video call from Emily. I didn't answer, but I let it ring long enough to see her face on the preview. She looked nothing like the woman who had laughed over her Starbucks cup a few days ago. Her eyes were red, makeup smudged, background dark. She'd always been so careful with her appearance, especially on camera. Seeing her like that meant she was unraveling. Another message followed. I made a mistake. Please just talk to me. The kind of sentence that used to break me. But not now. Not after seeing that photo. Not after feeling what peace really sounded like. I turned off the screen and looked back at the sea. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, soft, distant, like the world reminding me that storms don't always destroy. Sometimes they just clear the air. That night, as rain began to fall, I wrote a short note on my phone. Not to send, just to keep. Some people don't realize what silence can do until it's the only voice left. I closed my eyes to the sound of the rain hitting the deck and thought, maybe this was the beginning of something new. Not for us. For me. By the 5th day, my absence had started to make noise. Ryan texted again, this time more direct. He said the story had flipped. People weren't asking why I'd left anymore. They were asking what she'd done. Word about her and Nathan was spreading fast, and from what he heard, Nathan wasn't handling the attention well. He deleted his social media, stopped showing up to work. I didn't need to do anything. The truth was moving on its own. I was sitting at a small outdoor bar near the resort, a quiet spot lit by hanging lights. The bartender wore a faded Gap t-shirt and played old country music from a Bluetooth speaker. I ordered a whiskey and just listened. Every night since I'd arrived, I'd found myself speaking less, thinking slower. That calm, steady silence, it was becoming a habit. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Emily. It was an email from a private account. Inside were screenshots, messages between her and Nathan. Long, late-night chats full of half-truths and promises. The kind of conversation that only happens when people think no one's watching. But the sender wasn't Nathan. It was someone else from her office. Maybe a jealous coworker. Maybe someone who just wanted to stir the fire. Either way, it didn't matter. I didn't save them. I just read enough to know everything I needed. I leaned back in my chair and looked out over the water. Somewhere across that same ocean, she was probably trying to manage the fallout. I could imagine this scene. Her sitting on our couch, lights off, scrolling through old messages, realizing that the silence she'd created was now working against her. That night, I decided to move hotels. Not out of fear, but instinct. I wanted somewhere quieter, away from the tourists. I found a private villa a few miles up the coast, booked it without hesitation, and turned off my phone again. No social media, no notifications. Just me. As I packed my things, I noticed how light my suitcase felt. I hadn't brought much, but even what I did now seemed unnecessary. That was the strange thing about distance. It stripped away everything you thought you needed. Before I left the bar, I finished my drink and glanced once more at the phone screen. 50 missed calls again. The same number as the first time. Maybe a coincidence. Maybe a pattern. Either way, I let it ring until it stopped. Somewhere between those unanswered calls and that final sip of whiskey, I realized something had already changed forever. I wasn't her husband playing along anymore. I was the quiet storm she never saw coming. The new villa was quieter, almost too quiet. The ocean here sounded different. Lower, slower, like it had secrets it didn't want to share. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat outside watching the sunrise burn the edge of the water. It had been nearly a week since I'd left, and Emily's silence was finally matching mine. No new messages. No calls. Just stillness. For a while, I thought she might have given up. But then Ryan texted again. He said there'd been an incident at her office. Nathan had been called into HR. Someone had leaked their messages, the same ones I'd seen. She was pulled into it too. Her reputation, the one she'd built so carefully online and off, was unraveling fast. And still, I said nothing. I hadn't leaked anything. But I knew exactly who had sent me those screenshots, and that same person probably sent them elsewhere. I took a walk into the small town nearby, just to feel part of something again. At a tiny store that looked like it hadn't changed in decades, I bought a plain white shirt, some fruit, and a new notebook. The woman at the counter asked if I was on vacation. I said I was, though it didn't feel like one. It felt like a long exhale after years of holding my breath. Back at the villa, I opened the notebook and started writing. Not letters, not revenge fantasies, just fragments. Thoughts, moments, sentences that sounded like they belonged to someone who was finally done performing. I wrote about her laugh, the way it used to fill the room, and how somewhere along the way it turned into background noise. I wrote about the night she called me convenient, like I was a place she could rest until something better came along. That afternoon, as I sat by the pool, I noticed my reflection in the water. I looked different, calmer, older somehow. Not broken, just rewritten. When the sun dropped low, my phone buzzed one last time. A single message from Emily. I understand now. No apologies, no explanations. Just that. I stared at it for a long time, trying to decide whether to reply. I didn't. Instead, I placed the phone face down beside me and closed my eyes. The waves kept their rhythm, the sky dimmed into amber, and for the first time, her words didn't pull me anywhere. They just drifted away, like the last echo of something that used to matter. The seventh day felt like the calm after a storm. No new messages. No drama waiting behind the screen. Just the steady rhythm of waves and the hum of cicadas in the palm trees. But silence can be deceptive. It hides the echoes until they come back to you in ways you don't expect. That afternoon, I decided to check my email for the first time in days. There was one new message from Ryan. He said Emily had stopped showing up to work. Nathan had quit altogether, leaving town after being exposed. People were whispering that she'd had some kind of breakdown. I read it twice, not out of disbelief, but because it felt like a story happening to someone I no longer knew. I closed the email and walked down the beach. My reflection stretched across the wet sand, long and blurred. I thought about how a week ago, her laughter had filled our kitchen, her phone glowing in her hand as she played her little game. Let's fake a breakup for fun. Those words didn't hurt anymore. They just sounded small. When I got back to the villa, the sky was darkening. The air smelled like rain. I made dinner, simple pasta, a glass of wine, and ate outside under the dim light of the patio. My mind was quiet, but not empty. Somewhere inside, I could feel something rearranging itself. Not bitterness, not pride, just distance turning into understanding. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. A notification from Facebook. Someone had tagged me in a post. Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was Emily's latest update. A photo of an empty living room. Ours. The caption said, "Sometimes silence teaches you who you really were to someone." The comments were full of sympathy, confusion, theories. Some blamed me, others her. But what caught my eye was a single comment from Ryan. Maybe he just stopped playing the game. I turned off the screen and sat there for a long time, listening to the storm build over the water. The thunder rolled in slowly, then cracked open the sky. It felt like a mirror of everything that had led to this. Loud, brief, necessary. When the rain finally came, I didn't move inside. I just let it fall, soaking through my clothes, cooling my skin. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for her to understand me. I was simply letting her face the silence she created. And that silence was louder than any words I could ever say. By the 8th day, I felt detached from time. The sound of the waves, the heat, the slow rhythm of each morning, it all blurred together. It wasn't escape anymore. It was transition. The man who'd boarded that plane was gone. What remained was someone quieter, more deliberate, someone who no longer needed to explain his silence. I sat at a cafe near the water, drinking espresso, watching tourists argue about where to take pictures. One of them dropped their iPhone into the sand and cursed under their breath. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because I recognized something familiar in that frustration, the illusion of control slipping away. When I got back to the villa, I found a message waiting on my phone. Not from Ryan. From her. Just a voice memo. I hesitated before playing it. Her voice came through soft, uneven, nothing like the confident tone she used to have. She said she'd lost everything. Her job, her friends, even her apartment. She said she couldn't stop thinking about the moment I didn't answer her calls. That silence, she said, was what finally broke her. I didn't reply, but I listened to it twice. Not out of cruelty, just clarity. For the first time, she wasn't performing. There was no camera, no audience, no filters. Just her voice stripped bare. And I realized how much truth lives in the moments people can't edit. That evening, I took the truck the resort had lent me and drove down the coast. The road wound through small fishing villages and open fields, the smell of salt and smoke in the air. I stopped at a roadside diner. Nothing fancy, just metal tables and the buzz of neon lights. The waitress poured me coffee and asked if I was traveling alone. I said yes. She smiled, said that sometimes being alone is the only way to hear yourself think. When I returned to the villa, I sat on the porch until the stars came out. My phone was on the table beside me, screen dark. I didn't need to block her. I didn't need to reply. The distance itself was the message. Somewhere back home, she was facing the consequences of her own story. Not because I'd exposed her, but because she finally had to live without the audience she'd built. And for people like her, silence isn't absence. It's punishment wrapped in peace. The ninth day felt heavier. Maybe it was the humidity, or maybe it was the weight of everything unsaid finally settling. I woke up before sunrise, made black coffee, and walked along the shoreline. The sky was pale and quiet, the kind of silence that feels alive. I didn't realize how much I'd changed until I caught my reflection in the window of a closed shop. There was calm in my face now, an absence of need. When I checked my phone, there was another message from Ryan. He said Emily had tried to reach him, asking if he'd heard from me. She was back at her parents' house, apparently. No job, no Nathan, no followers posting heart emojis under her captions. Just isolation. He said she'd been talking about how she finally got it, though no one really knew what she meant. I didn't respond to him either. I'd learned that silence wasn't just the absence of noise. It was a kind of power. A mirror that forces people to face what they've done. Around noon, I drove into the nearest town to grab lunch. The diner was almost empty, just a couple of fishermen and a waitress wiping down tables. She poured me coffee without asking, and for a few minutes, I just sat there, watching the ceiling fan spin. It struck me that peace wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It just arrived when you stopped chasing it. When I got back, I found a letter waiting for me. Not an email. A real, physical letter with her handwriting on the envelope. I hadn't seen it in so long that it almost felt foreign. She must have sent it to the resort days ago. I held it for a while before opening it. Inside was a single page. No excuses, no begging. Just a quiet confession. She wrote that she'd spent so long trying to look strong that she forgot what being honest felt like. That she'd mistaken attention for love, noise for connection. And that the silence between us had become the only thing she trusted now. I read it twice and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't feel anger or pity, just clarity. She'd finally hit the point where truth stripped her down to what was real. As the sun fell behind the ocean, I sat on the porch and watched the light fade. Somewhere far away, she was learning what it meant to lose someone who stopped needing to be found. The 10th morning was clear and quiet, the kind of morning that feels like an ending and a beginning at once. The sea outside the villa was still, glass-like. I made coffee, opened the windows, and let the breeze move through the room. It was my last day here. My flight home was in the evening. I wasn't sure why I was going back. Maybe because I finally could, without anger or attachment. I packed slowly, folding the same few clothes I'd worn all week, leaving behind the small traces of a man who'd come here to disappear. Before I left, I opened the notebook I'd been writing in and tore out a single page, the one with her name on it. I set it on the table, let the wind take it. Some things don't need closure, they just need release. At the airport, I turned my phone back on. Dozens of notifications flooded in, emails, missed calls, messages. But one stood out, another voice memo from her. I hesitated, then pressed play. Her voice was different this time, steady, calm. She said she didn't expect forgiveness, didn't even expect a response. She just wanted to say thank you, that the silence had shown her more about herself than any words ever could. She said she finally understood that I hadn't left to punish her. I'd left to find peace. And that peace had found her too, in the wreckage. I sat there, listening to the hum of people around me, the soft announcements over the intercom. It hit me then that this wasn't a story about betrayal anymore. It was a story about distance, the kind that destroys illusions and rebuilds clarity. When I landed back home, the air felt colder. The drive from the airport was quiet. I passed familiar streets, familiar lights, but everything looked slightly different, as if I was seeing it all for the first time. When I pulled into our driveway, her car wasn't there. The house was dark. I didn't go inside right away. I just sat there, engine off, hands still. Eventually, I stepped out and walked to the porch. The door was unlocked. Inside, the house was clean but empty. No scent of her perfume, no scattered clothes, no phone charger left behind. Just space. On the counter, a single envelope. My name written on it. Inside was one line. If peace is rules, I'll follow them. I smiled. Not because she'd said what I wanted to hear, but because she finally understood the only thing that ever mattered. Mutual respect born from silence. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Some endings don't need noise to be complete. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.